They called her a paper soldier the moment she walked in. Said she probably fought more keyboards than enemies. Just another admin clerk who wandered too far from her desk. But when the tape on her wrist slipped and the major saw 9 burn marks, lined up in perfect symmetry like battlefield tallies, everything changed. She wasn't trying to show off. She never had. But the room fell silent. Because those marks weren't decoration. And she wasn't just a name in a forgotten file. She was the reason their unit still existed. Want to know what those burn marks really meant? And why 3 cocky reservists learned the hardest lesson of their military lives? Hit subscribe. Leave a comment, tell us where you're watching from. Let's begin. The sun hadn't fully cleared the fence line when she stepped through the side entrance of Hangar 9 at Fort Ironwood. The building was half awake, a low hum of fluorescent lights, the scent of disinfectant, and the metallic clang of early morning reps echoing in the background. That smell, a cocktail of sweat, effort, and institutional memory, lingered in every military gym across the country. It didn't matter whether it was Bragg, Benning, or here. It was always the same. Claire Donnelly, 42, moved like someone with no time for wasted motion. Her PT shirt was so faded the print had almost disappeared. Her boots weren't polished, but they were shaped to her step, molded by ground most of these kids would never see. She wore a ball cap pulled low. No insignia, no logos. Just one of those green, sun-bleached standards that looked like it'd seen 100 hangars and 1,000 miles of bad road. And she carried an old, soft duffel, one that didn't scream anything at all. The 3 reservists near the weight bench didn't see any of that. They saw a woman past 40, alone, quiet. And they made a mistake. PFC Tyler Spence, tall, wiry, full of morning sarcasm, was the first to speak. "Well, hell, looks like my mom wandered in from the commissary." SPC Josh Toiver, leaning against a kettlebell rack, grinned. "Nah, she's logistics. You can smell the toner from here." CPL Matt Danner didn't say anything, just smirked and shook his head. They all laughed. The kind of careless, easy laughter young soldiers trade when they think no one important is listening. Claire didn't react. She stepped past them like she hadn't heard a thing or like she'd heard it 100 times before. Behind the desk, MSGT, Rick Delaney barely looked up from the clipboard in his hand. "Sign-in's digital now," he muttered, thumb pointing toward a smudged fingerprint scanner. "Press and hold." She placed her thumb gently. Green light. Access granted. Delaney glanced at the screen, paused for a half second, then looked again. He didn't say anything, just gave her a nod. Not approval, not surprise, just recognition. Claire walked through the checkpoint with the same quiet authority she'd carried for years. Not demanding space, just not giving any away, either. She reached the far side of the gym, laid her duffel down, and unzipped it slowly. To the 3 young men still watching her, she looked like a misplaced contractor. Maybe someone who used to be in and couldn't quite let it go. They had no idea what was coming. But the wrapping of her wrist would be the first signal. And the silence that followed would say more than they were ready to hear. Claire sat down near the far wall of Hangar 9, away from the machines and the usual noise. She opened her old canvas duffel and pulled out 2 black wrist wraps. No logo, no brand, just plain cloth worn thin from use. She wrapped her left hand first. No hesitation, no wasted motion. She looped it over the thumb, pulled tight, folded, turned once, twice again, then moved to the right hand. It was routine, the kind that comes from doing the same task thousands of times, under all kinds of conditions, some of them far from peaceful. Across the gym, the same 3 young reservists kept watching, still talking, still unaware. PFC Tyler Spence spoke first. "Look at her, wrapping up like she's heading into a title match. Probably just here to stretch and ask for a towel." SPC Josh Toiver joined in. "She's got that CrossFit energy, old school version, probably posts motivational quotes on a blog somewhere." CPL Matt Danner laughed once, not loud, but enough to keep pace with the other 2. Claire said nothing. As she shifted to her right wrist, her compression sleeve slipped down, just an inch, but it was enough. Spence leaned forward, squinting. "Wait a sec," he said under his breath. "What is that?" Toiver followed his gaze, his eyebrows raised slightly. "Looks like tally marks or something." Claire kept rapping. The marks were clear now. 9 straight lines, burned into the skin of her inner forearm just beneath the wrist bone. Evenly spaced. The skin around them darkened, scarred. Not ink, not tattoo. Burn marks. Spence tried to act amused. Okay, so what is that supposed to be? Combat cosplay? Toiver stepped closer, looking again. Some people get real into their backstory. I've seen weirder, warrior, aesthetic, whatever. Danner was quiet now. He'd stopped leaning. His arms were crossed. Claire adjusted the wrap, finished the loop, tucked the end under. Smooth, secure. She pulled her sleeve down again, not fast, not slow. Just done. Then she stood. No announcement, no stare down, no effort to explain. But she spoke. Good thing this isn't a senior center. They're usually too easy. The words weren't sharp. They weren't loud. But they were clear, calm, measured. Spence opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Toiver shifted his stance. The gym didn't go silent, not entirely, but the rhythm changed. The tone dropped. You could feel the shift. Claire wasn't trying to intimidate anyone. She hadn't changed her pace, her voice, or her posture, but the atmosphere around her felt different now. To them, she had just been a contractor, a relic, someone who probably filed reports and gave HR briefings about ergonomics. Now, they weren't so sure. Toiver tried to recover. She probably did that herself. You know, like people who put decals on their truck and never served. Claire picked up her water bottle, drank once, recapped it. Then she walked slowly but deliberately toward the sparring mats near the center of the gym. She didn't look back. Behind her, the three young men didn't speak again for a while. The marks were burned and not decorative, not symbolic. And none of them could shake the thought, what if they were real? And what would that mean about her? Inside Hangar 9, nothing had physically changed. The lights still buzzed, weights still clanked, and the old fan in the corner kept turning, but the tone in the room was no longer the same. It had started with a few glances. By now, all three young soldiers had gone quiet. Claire had finished her wrist wraps and was now standing near the edge of the sparring mat, stretching without flair or routine. Her motions were efficient. There was no wasted effort, no exaggerated preparation. Just movement done right, like someone who had performed these drills thousands of times before, for reasons that had nothing to do with gym schedules or training rotations. Spence wasn't smiling anymore. His arms hung loose at his sides. Toiver had stopped leaning and now stood with both feet planted. Danner stayed where he was but had uncrossed his arms. None of them spoke. They weren't sure what they were looking at anymore. Claire rolled her shoulders once and shifted her weight side to side. Her eyes briefly scanned the mat, not as if she were sizing up an opponent, but checking the floor for spacing, distance, and alignment. She moved like someone who had learned not to trust uneven ground. At the sign-in desk, Master Sergeant Delaney returned from the back hallway, clipboard in hand. He glanced toward Claire, then the board, then back again. His face didn't change, but he paused just long enough for someone paying attention to notice. Claire walked over, took the pen that was chained to the top corner, and signed her name. Her handwriting was deliberate, clear, block lettering, the kind you learn to use when documents have to be read fast under pressure. She clipped the pen back and turned without a word. Spence muttered to no one in particular. She actually signed up. No one responded. Claire made her way back to the edge of the mat. She bent down, tugged gently at the laces on her boots, adjusted the fit, stood, and rechecked the placement of her wraps. Each movement was direct and exact. She wasn't warming up. She was preparing. Toiver watched her closely now. Do you think this is some kind of evaluation? Spence shook his head. They don't send evals in like this. Danner, who had said the least until now, spoke low and certain. She's not here for show. That thought stayed with all of them. Up until 10 minutes ago, they had seen her as background noise, an older woman in faded gear. Now, none of them were sure what she was. But whatever she was doing, it was starting to feel like the three of them had misunderstood everything. Nobody laughed. Nobody joked. The room wasn't silent, but the weight in the air had shifted. And for the first time since Claire Donnelly walked into Hangar 9, they weren't focused on how old she looked or whether she belonged there. They were focused on what she was about to do, and whether they wanted to be anywhere near it. Master Sergeant Rick Delaney walked back toward the check-in board, still holding his clipboard. He moved like someone who had seen too much to be easily surprised, and yet there was a moment, a split-second pause when he looked over the sparring roster and saw the signature on top. He didn't say anything, just gave a short grunt of acknowledgement, then tacked the clipboard to the wall near the mat. Claire had signed her name without hesitation, block letters, sharp and steady. The pen hadn't wavered. The placement was exact. It was the kind of handwriting you see on combat logs, not sign-up sheets. Spence saw the signature too and raised an eyebrow. She actually put her name down? He said it with a half laugh, like someone still unsure if this was all one long misunderstanding. Claire turned to look at him. No glare, no smile. Just a calm, direct look that made the space between them feel more narrow than it actually was. "You're welcome to test whatever theories you've been developing," she said. The tone wasn't confrontational. It wasn't loud or proud, but it landed. The weight of it hung in the air for a beat longer than anyone expected. Spence didn't have a comeback. Not right away. Toiver cleared his throat and said, "Okay, that's cute, but just so we're clear, this isn't yoga hour. It's sparring rotation. Full contact training." Claire nodded once. "Understood." Delaney, standing nearby, looked over his clipboard again and spoke up without turning his head. "Light contact only. Respect rank and safety protocols. If you break the rules, you're done for the week." Then he looked up at Claire. "You cleared for this?" "Yes, Sergeant." Her voice was even, not defensive, not challenging, just firm. There was no question in it. Delaney stared for half a second, then moved on like he had heard what he needed to hear. Spence walked closer to the board, reading her name again, as if trying to make sense of it by looking harder. "All right, guess this is happening," he muttered. Then he turned back toward his buddies and tried to inject some energy into his tone. "Should be interesting." Danner, who had been quiet until now, shifted his weight and spoke in a low voice. "I don't think she's bluffing." Toiver looked at him sideways. "Come on, man. You're buying into the act now?" "She's not acting," Danner replied. He wasn't trying to convince anyone. He was saying it for himself. Claire returned to her position near the mat. She took a sip from her bottle, then knelt to tighten the laces on her boots. Every movement was done with control. The same way she had wrapped her hands, the same way she had walked in. No wasted effort, no hesitation. Spence watched her the whole time, now more curious than amused. He was trying to decide whether to be impressed or irritated, maybe both. He spoke up again. "You got any ground rules? Or are we doing this old school?" Claire stood, wiped her hands once, and answered simply, "Whatever makes it fair." The statement was clear, but it wasn't casual. It came from someone who had lived through fights where fairness wasn't an option and survived anyway. Delaney checked his watch and called out, "Next rotation starts in 2. Pair off." Spence stepped forward, already deciding who he wanted to face. Claire met his gaze, calm as ever. He grinned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Let's see what you've got, Grandma." She didn't respond. She just nodded once and walked to the center of the mat. Behind them, the rest of the gym continued like normal, but the space around the sparring ring had started to draw quiet attention. A few heads turned. Not because anyone expected a show, but because the atmosphere had changed. There was a tension now, one that hadn't been there earlier. And no one, not even Spence, was laughing anymore. The mat area had a clear perimeter. Bright yellow tape bordered each side, square and perfect, laid down with military precision. The surface was rubberized, worn but clean, and surrounded by enough space for people to observe without getting in the way. A few soldiers had begun drifting over, casually at first, not enough to form a crowd, but just enough to know something was about to happen. PFC Tyler Spence bounced on the balls of his feet. His hands were loose at his sides, his shoulders relaxed in the exaggerated way that young fighters use to show confidence. He rolled his neck left, then right, cracked his knuckles, looked across the mat at Claire, and smiled wide. "You ready?" he asked, his tone half playful, half taunting. Claire Donnelly didn't move. Her stance was neutral, feet planted, hands down, shoulders square. Her eyes were steady, watching his motion but not following it. "Go easy on me," Spence added, lifting his fists and shifting into a stance that looked like it had been copied from a training video. His form was decent textbook, but untested. Master Sergeant Delaney stood just off to the side, clipboard under one arm. "Timer starts on contact," he said. Spence didn't rush in, he circled. Light footwork, small steps, throwing out half-speed jabs that didn't get close. He was testing her or trying to. Claire didn't flinch. She didn't move at all, except for the slow pivot of her feet, adjusting her angle with every step he took. She tracked him like a machine, no tension, no extra motion, just centered. Spence finally decided to engage. He stepped in with a quick jab to the shoulder, followed by a low feint to the right. Claire didn't bite. She kept her balance, adjusted once, then returned to neutral. He stepped back. People watching started to notice. She wasn't doing much, but somehow, she was never off balance. Spence tried again. This time, he closed distance fast and came in with a real shot, a left hook aimed toward her outer arm. It wasn't reckless, but it was full speed. That's when she moved. Claire shifted her weight, pivoted into him, reached across his chest with one arm, and in a single motion used his momentum to turn him. Her hips slipped into place like a lever. She braced her stance, bent slightly, and lifted. Then he was airborne. Spence left the mat with both feet at once, fully committed, off balance, and completely caught. He hit the ground hard, not enough to injure, but more than enough to knock the wind from him. The thud echoed through the gym like someone had dropped a heavy bag of sand. Everyone turned. Delaney didn't blink. He just glanced at the clock and marked the time. Spence lay there for a second, blinking up at the ceiling. Then he rolled to his side, exhaled hard, and sat up. His face had changed. The grin was gone. His eyes searched the mat like he had missed something and was trying to find it. Claire stepped back, not aggressive, just resetting her stance. Spence stood, slower now, brushing off his arm. He tried to recover with a crooked smile. "Lucky shot," he muttered. Claire didn't answer. He looked at her again, this time more carefully. She hadn't moved from her original spot more than a few inches. Her breathing was steady, no sign of effort, no sign of strain. The people watching didn't say anything, but they were paying attention now. The gym noise hadn't stopped, but it had shifted to the background. More eyes were on the mat than before. Spence walked in a small circle, trying to shake it off. He bounced again, but it looked less sure this time. He glanced at his friends Toiver and Danner, but neither was smiling. Toiver had his arms folded. Danner had his hands in his pockets. Across the mat, Claire stood ready. She didn't take a step forward. She didn't need to. Spence settled his weight and nodded. "Okay, let's go again." Delaney gave a quick nod. "Resume." The timer clicked back on. And this time, nobody underestimated her. Spence reset his stance. He was quieter now, more focused, and for the first time since stepping on the mat, cautious. His hands came up higher, his steps shorter. Whatever confidence had filled him before had thinned out, replaced by calculation. Claire didn't move. She waited, centered, calm. Her hands were relaxed, her feet steady. There was no change in expression, no aggression, just presence. Delaney gave the signal again. Time's live. Spence didn't play around this time. He went straight in, not reckless, but committed. He came in low, aiming to use his size and momentum. His strategy was clear. Close the gap fast, get his arms around her, bring her down with weight instead of finesse. But Claire didn't need to guess. She'd seen this before, probably dozens of times. She shifted, just slightly, and stepped offline. Her left boot scraped softly as she pivoted. When he came in, she let him pass by inches, then reached in and hooked his leading leg with hers. It was a simple motion, but it broke his balance. Before he could correct, she caught his right wrist and turned her hips again, pulling him into a controlled fall. This time, he didn't hit hard. She brought him down without impact, but the control was total. And when he landed, her knee was on his chest and his right arm was twisted. Not enough to injure, but enough to stop him cold. Claire looked down at him. Not unkind, not victorious, just watching. "Tap," she said, soft, but unmistakable. Spence slapped the mat 3 times. Claire released immediately. She stood, stepped back, and reset her stance again. Spence stayed down for an extra second. He wasn't hurt, but he was breathing heavier now. The realization had settled. This wasn't just someone older and experienced. She was better, much better. He sat up slowly, rolling his shoulder. His eyes went to his teammates across the room. Toiver was staring, arms crossed tighter now. Danner had stopped pretending this was entertainment. His expression had gone from amused to serious, and maybe something more than that, maybe regret. Claire didn't say a word. She walked over to the edge of the mat, picked up her water bottle, and took a slow drink. Her breathing was even, no sign of fatigue. She stood by herself, adjusting the tension in her wrist wraps with the same methodical movements she'd used before. Behind her, Spence stayed kneeling, collecting himself. He wasn't embarrassed, not in the childish sense, but something had cracked. His view of her, and maybe of himself, wasn't the same anymore. Toiver mumbled, "What the hell was that?" Danner answered, low and serious, "That wasn't beginner's luck." There wasn't anything else to say. Delaney walked over, looked down at Spence, then up at Claire. His tone stayed neutral. "Rotation's open. Anyone else?" No one stepped forward. Claire placed her bottle back down, tightened her laces once more, and took a seat at the edge of the mat. Spence rose, walked over to the sideline, and sat down slowly, stretching out his arm. He didn't look angry. He looked like someone trying to process a lesson he didn't expect to get that morning. The energy in Hangar 9 had changed. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about what they had assumed and how far off they had been. For Claire, there was no celebration, no comment, no smirk. She had shown exactly what she needed to show. Nothing more. The main doors to Hangar 9 opened with a quiet hiss, the kind of sound that barely registered under normal conditions. But in that moment, with the gym unusually quiet, every head turned. Colonel Everett McGraw stepped inside. He was in full-duty uniform, pressed but practical, with a soft clipboard tucked under his left arm. Mid-50s, gray at the temples, eyes sharp from decades of command. He walked with purpose, not urgency, the stride of a man who had spent a career watching rooms before stepping into them. He paused inside the threshold, scanning the space. There was no shouting, no music, no normal morning noise. That in itself was unusual. His gaze moved from the free weight section to the mat. He took in the sparring gear, the shifting attention of younger soldiers, the awkward posture of the 3 reservists near the wall. Then his eyes landed on Claire Donnelly, seated quietly on the edge of the mat. She was adjusting her wrist wrap again. Nothing flashy, no expression. Just a routine, methodical gesture. But her sleeve had pulled back slightly, and he saw the marks. McGraw's steps slowed. He walked toward MSGT, Rick Delaney, who stood near the equipment room, watching everything like a man who already knew what was about to happen. "Sergeant," McGraw said, voice low and steady. "What's going on here?" Delaney handed over the clipboard. "Live sparring rotation, open sign-up. That woman added her name about 20 minutes ago." McGraw looked down at the roster. His pen halted halfway through a motion. One name stood out clean, firm block letters. Claire Donnelly. There was a small shift in his face, not surprise, not confusion. Something deeper. Recognition. Like a puzzle piece falling into place after being missing for years. He didn't say anything for several seconds. Then he looked up and across the room, eyes back on her. She hadn't moved, hadn't changed posture, but she met his gaze directly, calm, neutral. There was no challenge there, no expectation, just acknowledgement, professional and quiet. McGraw stepped closer. The reservists, Spence, Toiver, Danner, shifted uncomfortably under his presence. Spence tried to lighten the mood, gesturing toward Claire. "She's got some kind of markings on her arms. Look real dramatic, like something out of a movie." McGraw turned to look at him. His tone didn't change, but the authority in his voice cut through the air like a command. "Do you boys have any idea what you're looking at?" The question wasn't rhetorical. Toiver hesitated. "War paint?" McGraw shook his head once, slow, then turned back toward Claire and spoke, not to her, but for the room. "That's not decoration. It's not body art. It's not a gimmick." He took a few more steps forward, now fully in view of everyone. "Those are burn scars, each one made intentionally, not with ink, not with laser, but with heat, the old way, because tattoos didn't hold up where she operated." The younger soldiers were silent now. He glanced back toward the clipboard. Claire Donnelly served with Ghost Co.7, a deep insertion unit that operated outside grid systems. No tracking, no acknowledgement. Half of their operations don't even exist on formal records. He turned toward the 3 reservists again. "Those marks represent confirmed kills, Real ones. Ones that never made it to command briefings or after-action reports. Spence swallowed. He looked down. So did Toiver. Danner didn't move. He was staring at Claire, trying to reconcile the quiet woman in the corner with what they were hearing now. McGraw kept going. Ghost Co.7 didn't wear unit patches. They didn't get deployment ceremonies. What they got were scars. And the rare few who made it out didn't talk about it. Because they weren't supposed to. Because nobody was supposed to know they existed. His eyes swept the room. 9 visible marks. That's 9 missions where someone was alive before she stepped in and wasn't after she walked out. And that's only the ones she chose to leave uncovered. The silence in the gym was complete now. Not the uncomfortable silence of awkwardness. It was something heavier. Respect mixed with the sharp sting of realization. Claire stood. Not fast, just steady. She adjusted her wrist wrap, pushed the sleeve back over the scars, and lifted her duffel from the ground. McGraw turned to face her. They finally cleared your paperwork? She nodded once. 8 months ago, civilian contractor status reinstated. He gave a small nod in return. Took them long enough. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. The entire room had already heard what mattered. Behind them, the 3 reservists stood motionless. No smirks, no posturing. Just the weight of a hard lesson settling in one they hadn't seen coming, and one they wouldn't forget. Colonel Everett McGraw stood quietly, clipboard still tucked under his arm. The moment hung in the air like a held breath. The gym had gone still, except for the faint hum of overhead lights and the steady turn of the fan in the corner. He looked over at the 3 young men near the wall, Spence, Toiver, and Danner. None of them met his eyes. Their confidence was gone, along with the casual smiles and half-baked jokes. What remained was quiet. Not from fear, but from understanding. McGraw spoke directly, his voice calm but firm. You just learned your first real lesson in uniform. They looked up at him. He continued, steady. You never know who you're talking to. That admin clerk you think doesn't belong might have saved more lives than you'll ever be asked to. That mechanic might have pulled his buddy out of a burning vehicle under fire. And that woman you mocked this morning, she didn't just show up here. She built the kind of record men spend their whole careers pretending they have. Toiver shifted his weight. Spence nodded slowly, his arms loose at his sides. Danner kept his eyes on the mat where Claire had stood. At the far end of the gym, Claire Donnelly zipped her duffel closed. She didn't move quickly. She folded her wraps, placed them carefully into the bag, then stood and adjusted the shoulder strap across her back. Her movements hadn't changed since she arrived, quiet, precise, deliberate. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't make eye contact. She had done what she came to do. And that was enough. McGraw turned to her as she approached the exit. Sergeant, he said, using the rank like it had never left her. She stopped just short of the doorway. You're still sharp, he added. Claire turned her head slightly. Not enough to break posture, just enough that he could see the side of her face. For the first time that morning, her expression shifted just a little. The faintest trace of a smile passed across her mouth. Not wide, not obvious, but real. Rust was never the problem, she said. Then she stepped through the door and disappeared into the morning light. The door eased shut behind her with a soft, final hiss. No applause, no fanfare, just silence. The kind that follows truth. Back near the mat, Spence sat down slowly. He rested his forearms on his knees, eyes on the floor. Toiver remained standing but had nothing to say. Danner finally spoke, voice low. We were way off. McGraw didn't correct him. He didn't need to. The correction had already taken place, not through punishment, but through presence. You'll remember this morning for a long time, McGraw said. The question is whether you just file it away as an embarrassing story or actually learn something from it. He looked at each of them in turn. Then he nodded once, turned, and left. No speech, no summary. Outside, Claire crossed the lot at a steady pace. The early sun had crested the fence line now, casting long shadows across the asphalt. She walked past the marked parking stalls and reached her truck, an older government-issued utility vehicle, clean but scratched. It had seen years, just like her. She opened the door, tossed the bag in, and sat behind the wheel. She didn't look back at Hangar 9. She didn't have to. Whatever needed to be said had already been said in silence, in movement, in the look from one officer to another. Back inside, The three young men remained in place. The gym slowly returned to normal weight racks, rattling, treadmills humming, but the tone wasn't quite the same. People had watched. People had listened. And people had understood, even if no one said a word. Respect isn't something you request. It's something you carry with you even when no one's looking. And sometimes, the most dangerous person in the room is the one who never says so. Some lessons aren't taught in manuals, they're learned in moments that humble us. This story reminds us that the people we overlook often carry the heaviest burdens. Claire Donnelly didn't ask to be recognized. She didn't boast or correct anyone. She simply showed up with grace, precision, and quiet strength. In a world that often values noise over experience, her presence reminded everyone in that room, and maybe us, too, that dignity isn't always loud. Sometimes it walks in with a duffel bag, leaves without applause, and changes the way people see forever. If you've ever felt unseen, underestimated, or quietly proud of the road you've walked, this story is for you. And if you know someone like Claire, someone who served, who endured, and never asked for attention, maybe take a moment to thank them. Or simply let them know you see them now. We tell these stories so that the quiet heroes among us are never forgotten. If this touched your heart, please consider subscribing to our channel for more true, powerful stories of honor and resilience. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other. God bless, and we'll see you again soon.